Hello and welcome to On the Move. We are Matt and Betsy, and we're here today on a rainy day. So it's kind of cool, even though it's the middle of summer. You're wearing a sweater, I'm in a sweater. But we wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the flora and fauna that here are on the island. But this is not, I'll disclaimer, an exhaustive list. We didn't do a whole bunch of research on it. We have not seen everything on the island. This is just what we've experienced in the last year that we've been here.
Yeah, so we'll talk what we've seen personally or had an interaction with at some point. And as a note, if we ever have sheep, I'm going to call them Flora, Fauna, and you have to have 3, so there'll be a pip.
Yes, that was the interesting thing to learn, that you have to have 3.
3 sheep. We won't get into that today because those are the domestic animals that you might find here, not so much the wildlife. I'm going to talk a bit about the wildlife, and Matthew will talk about the plant life. All right, so I'll go ahead and start. So I'm going to start from like the smallest little critters and kind of work my way up. We have had a few questions from viewers, so I'm going to try to answer those. And if you have any further questions, go ahead and pop them in the comments, and we'll try to find the answer for you if we don't know it. So, of course, there are bugs. This is Canada. And unless you live in a highly urban area where all of the flora and fauna are dead or hiding.
Or specifically manufactured and placed by humans.
Yes, you'll find bugs. So, of course, we do have mosquitoes. We've just come through black fly season.
Hopefully that's done.
We're hoping. Those are little tiny bugs. They're black and they look like flies, but they can bite. So,
yeah, they take chunks.
Yeah, and often leave like a swelling. I've got a few on my neck, and these will often show up while I'm mowing lawn. So I don't care what I look like. I wear clothing head to toe, ball cap, glasses, and hoodie, and I tie it tight because I'm disturbing everything in the grass as I cut it. So mosquitoes, black flies, and then these big kind of similar to a housefly, but I believe they're called cluster flies. They're really kind of dopey. They don't bite.
They hide in amongst little cracks and crevices, and if you disturb them, they fly out.
So when we took down our shutters last year, like insane amounts of these flies came out, to the point where I didn't realize it, and it actually like scared me off the ladder, and I had a bit of an injury. So once I realized what they were, and it was not a swarm of hornets or wasps, I was able to more calmly remove the rest of the shutters. And so far, we are still at a point where we actually haven't been here. So I'm going to see what August brings. But so far, we have a lot less around the house. And I think some of that has to do with I removed their hiding spot, as well as we've sealed everything up. So they're not in the house. But I say there's even less outside. But we are having a bit of a cooler summer. So far, that could also play into that. So those are kind of the major ones, and then there's other little flies. But the real irritants are the mosquitoes and the black flies. So owning a netted hat is nothing to be ashamed of. I intend to get one the moment I'm anywhere that they're available for mowing lawn. So from there, we move into, I'm going to talk like about squirrels. I'm going to do a lot of comparison to what we saw in Ontario because that's what we know. So I'm sorry, I have never been west of Ontario, so I won't be addressing things in terms of what you might find out west in Canada, but kind of anywhere from Ontario across the east we're fairly familiar with. So the squirrels where we were in Ontario, particularly in urban London, were big, chunky, fat, black, gray squirrels that were everywhere. Backyards, parks, they're very common. So you'd see them everywhere. The squirrels here are smaller.
They're tiny in comparison.
They are. I would call them, I've known them as a ground squirrel, is what we called them when I would visit northern Ontario.
On par with chipmunks.
Yes, they're both that size, but solid red. They don't have the striping of, or browny red. They don't have the striping of the chipmunk. And then there are chipmunks. I've seen them scurrying around, super cute no matter where they live. So I've seen those. And then kind of up from there, I have seen the occasional rabbit, but I actually saw more rabbits, again, when we were in the city than I do here. But I have a suspicion as to why. And we'll get to that in a moment. I'll remember to mention it. The other day, we were out walking. I know they're here. I prefer not to see them because, oh my gosh, they're bigger than you ever want to know. But we saw a rat. Thankfully, it was dead. Our dogs sniffed it or spotted it and wanted to grab it. But we're talking like big, healthy, brown rat. Thankfully,
country rat.
Healthy, although he was dead.
Wow.
Again,
Healthy
I'll address
size.
what took him out. I'm pretty sure I can figure out. Yeah, healthy size of rat. So they're around. We've had friends who've had to take care of them or get rid of them in their barn properties.
Yeah.
They're particularly attracted to like chicken feed and a feed or seed feed of any kind. So if you have that sort of stuff, you have to keep that well contained if you don't want to have a
yeah, we haven't had an issue, but we don't have a lot of that.
We don't have barn. Yeah, we don't have barn animals. And we're fairly open around us. We do have a meadow that's kind of growing right next to our house. I point this way because it's over there. So there could be, I'm guessing there's field mice and stuff in there. But I don't think that's not really a rat place. So so far, thankfully, we haven't had to deal with that. But it's part of country living. It's just, we'll deal with it if it happens.
It's common for people to have like barn cats and things, outdoor cats around to help with those sorts of issues.
Yeah, so there are rabbits here, but we haven't seen them. Next up from that is, that we've personally seen, are foxes. I think they're gorgeous. I think they're beautiful. I love seeing them. Again,
lots of them we've seen.
Yes, there is one that we know lives right in our neighborhood. I think we told you one day it was just jogging down the road. So I understand, again, for folks who are raising chickens, rabbits, anything of that sort, they can be a bit of a problem. But because we don't have that here at the moment, we just get to enjoy the lovely foxes. And then from there, so sort of our largest predator that you might like it, well, it is here on PEI, are coyotes. And we have in fact seen them, but interestingly enough, not in the summer months. You see them more in the winter, and I think that just has to do with the cover is less because the trees are bare. So I saw one running across a field one morning, is the closest I've seen. But then we've seen on our community posts some videos and stuff of them romping and playing in the fields. And again, we have not had issue with them.
There's some caution around.
A little bit of caution. If you have small dogs, you don't want to leave them out, especially if you live in a wooded lot, so that like your backyard is in the wooded lot. You don't want to leave a small dog unattended out back. If things get really desperate, sometimes they do go after livestock. So again, farmers have to be aware of that and have care and concern for their flocks of sheep or small young calves even.
We hear them yipping in the woods around us for sure.
That's true. So we don't see them in the summer, but we hear them. And pretty much like clockwork. When the sun goes down, 5 minutes later, we can hear them. And I think it's a beautiful sound. So it can be a little bit eerie and a little bit creepy, but also just this really beautiful chorus of these wild dogs that are singing away out in the woods. I think that pretty much
so we don't.
What we see, I was going to say what we don't have. We don't have bears. No bears.
So you were very happy about
I was, because I like to wander the woods. I like to be out in the bush. But having spent some time in I don't think they call it the bush here. It's just not quite big enough to be the bush. But Northern Ontario, it's definitely the bush. And so we've seen them. We have to be careful in Northern Ontario. We've encountered them in South Carolina.
They're all over mainland North America.
Exactly. Black bears. Is all
black
we've
bears,
come in contact with.
brown bears. We have the bigger ones are out west.
So I do know about that out west. We don't have grizzlies. Basically.
No.
Ontario, not into Ontario. They not across the prairies. Or you would, but like north is where they would be. So
no moose
and no deer. Which for me is actually, I enjoy that because evening dusk driving, I'm still catch myself being on alert to do the scan, because both Matthew and I have had experiences of, I don't know, hitting a deer or being hit by a deer, however you look at it. And it's scary. It's not a fun experience. And thankfully, neither of us have encountered moose in that situation, but we have been places where we know they are, and you do need to be cautious. And immediately off the bridge into New Brunswick, 5 minutes into your drive, you will see caution moose signs.
It makes me wonder like how long it will be if they'll ever come to the island, because it's just across the strait there. If they were to come, across the ice in the winter, perhaps, because they are right across in New Brunswick, and they've got when you're on highways, there's lots of fencing set up to protect both the animals and cars from run-ins for moose and for
My thought is
deer.
it wouldn't last long. Number one, I think they would probably
Well, I guess there's not a
allow
lot
it.
to support.
And there's not, the land mass is just not big enough to support it. Which, interestingly enough, about the coyotes, because I was doing some research about that as well, we learned that not too long ago, and for those of you who are animal lovers, I apologize in some senses for talking about this, but this is just what happens when nature and humankind live together. So coyotes were becoming quite an issue, and so this mostly happened in Nova Scotia that they figured it out. But there was an attempt to cull the coyotes. But coyotes, by nature, are just really intelligent and instinctual creatures. So what was happening is they'd cull them, but then the litter sizes would just double the next year. So they would make up for those that were lost. But what they realized then is they're very much dependent on a certain land mass. So they're very territorial. So essentially, if there's too many of them, they take care of each other, if you understand my meaning without getting too graphic. So they've actually learned that for the most part, they can just be left alone in terms of number, population management. But I do know they have a trapping season here.
Yeah.
It's just part of the fact of what's out here. So we know that does happen as well, but it's a limited season, just like anything else that is allowed to be hunted. So for those of you who that's not your thing, again, I apologize, but it's just a fact of life out and about in the wider world and beyond the city walls.
One other thing I think we should highlight, we have a hawk that lives in our garage.
Well, that's what I was going to come back to that. So in the skies, we have actually more predator birds than I've really ever seen.
Yeah.
So everything from beautiful, great big bald eagles flying around, who actually make me a bit nervous with my little dog. That would be another reason I wouldn't leave him out unattended. They can grab some pretty big critters. So lots of hawks. So I'm fairly certain that the rat that we saw dead was probably dropped or scared out of a bird's grasp, and so that's why it was just laying in the grass. Or cats. We have neighbors' cats around too who may have taken care of it. But yeah, so lots of bird life. Lots that I don't even recognize. Beautiful little finches of all kinds, swallows, starlings. There are folks who travel to Prince Edward Island specifically for bird watching. Lots of seabirds that we don't even know what they are.
Aside from seagulls, that's about where we end.
Which I have grown a new appreciation for seagulls. So in Ontario and often at the beaches at the Great Lakes, they have a bit of a bad rap because they're kind of nasty and they're thieves and
steal your food
and they get up to you, and their feathers are often
loud,
ruffled and kind of like garbage birds. But out here, and I'm gonna attribute it to the fact that they're eating what they actually should be eating. I'm assuming types of fish, etc. They're a little larger, they're smoother, they have beautiful gray tones to them. I think they're actually better and healthier looking out here by the ocean versus living off the urban garbage.
And they're not these giant flocks that kind of swarm around.
No, you don't see them the same as that. We have a couple of endangered species of birds here on the island that you run into at the beach. I believe it's called the piping plover. So if you go to some beaches and you see these signs about the piping plover, please take a few minutes to read them and then pay attention to the instructions they give you. We were at a beach recently where it talked about asking you when you're walking actually to walk on the wet sand because these birds are nesting on the dry sand. And if you startle them and disturb them enough, they may not return to their nest, which is not something we want considering they're endangered. And they're just cute little lovely birds. I think that about wraps up what we've seen. So if there's something you're really curious about, whether it's here or not, go ahead and ask below and we'll see if we can find out for you. Oh, the other note I should say that we know is kind of right across. As soon as you get off the island, we saw lots of porcupines in Nova Scotia. A lot of porcupines in Nova Scotia. Again, in Ontario, we don't see them. We know they're there, but you don't see them all that frequently. But along the highway, there was several of them. Unfortunately, had met an untimely demise due to the traffic, but it told us they were there. So, but we do not, to our knowledge, have a porcupine here.
Sure about that one, but we haven't seen any.
We haven't seen any evidence, and I haven't heard anyone talking about them. So if you're a local and you know, or you've had experience with porcupine on the island, go ahead and let us know.
I love to forage, which is why I get to talk about the flora of the area. And so around our place where we are here, we have a few things that we found so far. Well, first of all, domesticated. Well, I say domesticated, but it's probably not even the right word.
Again, we
Farm.
don't claim to know the educational history of all of the flora.
But there are blueberry fields just kitty corner to where we are. They cultivate those.
But I think they advertise them as wild blueberry.
Well, yeah, it's a different
plants.
process. They don't
Yeah.
feel like they plant them every year.
Mm-mm.
I don't. Anyways.
And they look more like the Northern Ontario wild
Yes.
blueberries as
Yeah.
opposed to the bushes we picked
Mhm.
at a farm
Yeah.
in London.
And so we do actually have this very small patch just growing in our front yard too.
Or we did. I might have hit it with the lawnmower.
And then also around us there are lots of wild strawberries. We're just coming to the end of strawberry season here. When I was teaching at school actually throughout June, a lot of the schoolyards, kids would go out into the field and they'd come back with handfuls of these wild strawberries that they would pick. And so we had them along the hedgerows by our place as well. But for some reason, the ones by us didn't really survive. I was excited to go find and forage off them, but by the time they should have been ripe, they'd either been picked over or they never made it.
Yeah, we saw tons of plants, and the strawberry plant was flowering.
Yeah.
And then we even saw some of the little berries, but they never seemed to
Yeah.
come to full.
Mm-hmm. And then there are raspberries around here. Lots. We have some down the way, and I've seen them various places on trails and off the roads too, as well. And apples. Lots and lots of apples, both wild and cultivated apples here in the province. And actually, that brings to mind too, there are some vineyards too. There's some nice PEI wine as well that you can get from the vineyards here.
Mentioning the apples, I do know I met a gentleman the other day at work who'd come into the shop, and he actually gets permission from the different landowners and goes around and collects all the wild apples and makes cider. He has a cidery that he runs here on the island.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, very nice. And then for trees, there is a mix of coniferous and deciduous trees. I think we're a pretty healthy mix here on the island. When you get into the woods, it's a lot of what I'd call garbage trees. Like the trees that grow first and fast in
So
there.
not hardwood.
Not a lot of hardwood on the island. I think that's because a lot of it was farmed in the last century or so, and so some of it they've allowed to go and start to grow trees again.
Yeah, and return back
to its natural state, but it's still getting there.
Yeah, it takes quite a while to get hardwoods into the cycle.
So there are birch and ash trees out there, but there are some small pockets of maple, and they're encouraging others as well. We actually, when we were at the Belfast days, we were given an oak tree, a little sapling like this tall, and so I planted it in our front yard, and then I looked up how long it takes these things to grow. They grow 60 centimeters a year at most. So it's going to be 20 years or so before we really see any shade off of that.
We'll see if we get a tree. And I also said, I'm not even going to name it till it makes it through its first winter.
Yeah, because neither of us are talented gardeners by any means.
No, basically we plant it and say, good luck, buddy.
Yeah. There are lots of gardening opportunities and facilities around the province. Actually, I love herbs, so that's what I try to plant. And so I planted some basil out here because I've had success with that in the past. The first row of basil I planted, I learned I planted too early. I think out of 9 plants, I have 1.5 left.
Yes, I think I heard the risky plant before June 10th.
Yeah, and I was in May when I planted.
Don't do it, because we still get frost.
Mm-hmm. So my second set I planted are doing very well. I think I've still got all those plants.
Which is fine, because they're actually the ones you were after.
This is true. Yeah, the first set I kind of settled on them because I couldn't find what I wanted, and then serendipitously one day I found exactly the basil plant I wanted, and so I planted more of it. It's a good thing because the first batch died.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we have, and then in the way of natural things, there's lots of wildflowers. You saw the lupins we had the other day, daisies.
Dandelions, because I've learned that some folks call those flowers.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Queen Anne's lace.
Yeah.
Actually, went and got a bouquet of flowers for friends the other day, and they were putting Queen Anne's lace right into it, which I kind of chuckled because I see it lots on the sides of roads.
We call it a weed.
We try to get rid of it, but and to their credit, it does add well to bouquets.
It has another name as well that you might be more familiar with, but I can't think of it at the moment. We'll look it up and put it down below.
Mm-hmm.
Queen Anne's lace is what we know it as, but I know there is another more.
Yeah, and actually thinking of
common
that, there
name.
is also here in the province there is a poisonous plant that looks almost identical to Queen Anne's lace. I can't remember the name right now, so I'm going to put it down at the bottom. But they tell you some of the tips to watch out for it, because it is actually quite dangerous even if you just touch it. Yeah. So I think that covers sort of what I wanted for
sums
the.
it up.
There is lots more out there as well.
We know, I don't know a whole lot about the water life around the island. I mean, it's the ocean, so
Yeah.
it contains most of it. I do know there are seals that do visit some of the beaches, but we have yet to make it to find them. But that is on my bucket list. I want to go and see seals.
It's funny. We drive over a bridge for what's called Seal River.
Yeah.
But we've learned they're actually, at this point in our history, there's not seals there.
So. But it's a tidal river too, so who knows? Mm-hmm. I do know our daughter has a classmate who lives quite close to the water. And she said she hears them. She can hear them barking from her bedroom window. So I know they're there, and they don't live very far from us. They're obviously at the same school. So they're close and they're around. We just have yet to go find them.
Yeah, we will for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And also, so we've got, of course, if you are a lover of seafood, either for the viewing purposes or the eating purposes, PEI is famous for its lobsters, its mussels, the oysters
and
clams too. Surrey is a good place for clam digging, although we have not participated in any of that.
We'll tell you about that when we get to it.
Yeah, we were given a nice little canned thing of clams, which was lovely too.
Yeah, we, having grown up sort of in central South Ontario, we don't know much about seafood, so we have lots to learn in that area.
I love to eat seafood, but no, we don't know anything about its natural state.
So thank you for joining us today. And if you're here visiting the island, I encourage you to keep your eyes open because the wildlife is quick. You'll enjoy the trees because they're slow. So either way, whatever you're here to do, just pay attention to your surroundings, and maybe you'll get a good spotting of one of those beautiful red foxes. Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't mention while we were talking about it earlier with the foxes. It's actually an interesting history. I won't go into it right here and now, but if you have an interest in fox, I encourage you to look it up and just research a little bit about how they got here. You can learn a little bit about the silver fox. Because it's just one of those things, again, where humankind gets their hands in things, and sometimes that can shake things up a bit. So it's an interesting story. So you go ahead and look into it if that's something that you want to enjoy. Otherwise, we will see you next time, and take care.
Thanks for watching.